If you're seeing this video, then that means I have just broken 2,000 subscribers. Congratulations to me. But seriously, you guys are fucking awesome. And words cannot describe how grateful I am for each and every one of you for clicking on these videos and subscribing. Truth be told, as of the time I'm recording this, it's the day after I hit 1,000 subscribers, and it does seem a little weird to be recording this so preemptively, but I mean, I got to 1,000 subscribers way more quickly than I anticipated, so it's better to just be prepared this time around. So without further ado, let's get right into my analysis of South Park All Hell Breaks Loose. Actually, that's a pretty offensive title. So how about South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut? Real quick, I should probably get into a history lesson about how this movie came about. It was sometime in 1998 when Matt Stone and Trey Parker were sitting around a desk at South Park Studios, mostly procrastinating around, when one of the two goes, "Hey, you know, if we ever do a South Park movie, it should be about the boys trying to sneak in to see an R-rated movie." When the other one looks up and says, "Yeah, and then they go to war with Canada." History lesson over. The movie opens up with Stan singing the song Mountain Town, and I hate to go right into gushing about this movie this early on. Wait, what am I saying? No, I don't. I love gushing about this stupid movie. But I mean, this is just the perfect opening sequence to a South Park movie, you know? It subverts the expectations of existing fans of the show. I mean, after all, what South Park fan was expecting to go into the movie only for it to be a musical, especially given the fact that Paramount Pictures absolutely did not allow the movie to be advertised as such? But, you know, we'll get into Paramount's meddling with this movie later. This opening sequence also does an amazing job of introducing all these characters to general audiences for the first time. Establishing Stan as the assertive leader, establishing Kenny as the weird poor kid, establishing Kyle's timidness towards his mother, and establishing Cartman's crass, selfish abrasiveness. But most brilliantly of all, it actually foreshadows the later reveal that Sheila Broflovsky is the antagonist of the movie. I mean, they even go as far as to put her motivations later right in the script here, now. Having her say that the world is such a rotten place and that she came to South Park in order to get away from it all, it perfectly shows her mentality of, well, anything wrong with my baby can't be my fault, it's everyone around me. In any case, by the end of the song, the four boys have gotten together and are well on their merry way to see Terrence and Philip Asses of Fire. Unfortunately, Rick, the ticket booth guy, refuses to sell them tickets because Terrence and Philip Asses of Fire is an R-rated movie. Luckily, thanks to Stan's quick thinking, the four boys hire a homeless man to get them into the movie. After all, kids are allowed to go see a movie that's rated R as long as they have adult supervision. The movie begins and the boys get to behold the wonder of Terrence and Philip just swearing at each other, exchanging farts, obscenities, and high-pitched Canadian laughter. The two then break out into the completely wholesome song, and the four main boys are completely shocked, bewildered, yet enamored by this display. So then we jump forward in time to the end of the movie when the boys are leaving the theater claiming that movie was fucking sweet and they want to be just fucking like Terrence and Philip. Then they head over to Stark's Pond to meet up with all their friends and classmates to go hang out and ice skate, and you know, maybe also brag about the fact that they snuck into the Terrence and Philip movie. This is when Stan notices the girl that he likes, Wendy Testaberger, skating over by herself doing twirls and shit like a fucking figure skater. Wendy introduces Stan to her new friend and love interest for the movie, Gregory, a transfer student from Yardale, where he had a 4.0 grade point average. And Gregory just scoops up Stan's girl and whisks away like the fucking baller-ass Chad he is. Meanwhile, the other boys are still off to the side bragging about seeing Asses of Fire, and Cartman asks who wants to touch him since he saw the movie, and there are almost no takers, but luckily Butters is there to bask in Cartman's greatness. And unfortunately for any fellow Butters stans, this and one other scene are pretty much all we get throughout this entire movie. Then as all the other kids rush off to go see the Terrence and Philip movie for themselves, there's this quick little scene.
I hate you, Kenny.
Why they decided to leave this honestly completely pointless scene into the movie is beyond me, but this 2 seconds right here, this is my favorite part of the whole movie. The next scene is by far the most popular scene in this entire movie, maybe the most popular scene in all of South Park's existence. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Even if you don't watch South Park, you've heard the audio to this scene elsewhere. I'm referring, of course, to the
"How would you like to suck my balls, Mr. Garrison?"
scene, which was a pretty huge meme from the early to mid-2000s. I remember people taking this audio and applying it to scenes from all sorts of different other shows like Ed, Edd n Eddy, SpongeBob, and a bunch of other things. But I digress. Cartman's outburst leads to the boys being sent to the guidance counselor's office, where Mr. Mackey reprimands the boys and calls their mothers in to discuss their abhorrent behavior. And keeping with this movie's theme of making situations worse by blaming others, Cartman passes the blame of their language onto the movie, stating that the movie has warped his fragile little mind. And then there's the scene in the school cafeteria, which on first examination might appear to be completely pointless and might seem like it could just be taken out of the movie without consequence, but it actually is kind of important. As it's in this scene that Stan notices Wendy and Gregory are getting closer, and so he asks Chef how to make a woman like him more than any other guy. Chef informs him that the way to do that is to find the clitoris, but then realizing what he just said to an 8-year-old, he quickly dismisses Stan before he can query any further. After a quick news scene of Sheila Broflovsky protesting the movie, we go into Mr. Mackey's legendary song, It's Easy MK, which I'm not going to discuss at length here, mostly because I want to do a separate video where I talk about the songs in this movie. So, yeah. The point is, after the song, Mr. Mackey feels the kids are completely rehabilitated and sends them home early. Naturally, all the kids ditch school to go watch the Terrence and Phillip movie again. This time we get to see the end of the movie where Terrence sets himself on fire by trying to light a fart. Right here, I want you to take notice of Philip's exact phrasing here.
You burned yourself to death by lighting your fart!
So pretty much in the film itself, Terrence and Phillip acknowledge that these actions are potentially fatal should they be emulated. But anyways, the film wraps up, and as the boys are heading out of the theater, Cartman bets Kenny $100 that he can't light a fart on fire. Kenny obliges and ends up igniting himself in flames as well. The hospital scene is just more gold, with shit like this screaming, useless doctor just flailing around in the background, all the blood and gore all over the place causing Stan to throw up, which causes Kyle and Cartman to stand out for being gross and sick. And just, my hat goes off to George Clooney's performance as Dr. Doctor here. His delivery on the baked potato line slays me every time. Unfortunately, the doctors lose Kenny, and just as the boys are grieving about it, their mothers come in to confront them for watching that horrible movie again. As this is going on, Kenny slips away into the afterlife. Unfortunately, as he begins to head towards the light, it's revealed that he didn't make it into heaven and that he is in fact going to hell. For saying bad words and throwing rocks at the birds, now hell's his hotel. He ain't going back, this ain't Disneyland, it's hell. Meanwhile, in the land of the living, Sheila Broflovsky is called a PTA meeting. She proclaims that Terrence and Phillip, as well as Canada's vulgarities, have gone far enough. And with the rallying cry of Blame Canada, she and the rest of the PTA take to the streets, with the musical accompaniment of the titular Academy Award-losing song. Damn you, Phil Collins. At the end of the song, they read a paper that reveals that Terrence and Phillip are set to appear on The Conan Show. Terrence and Phillip make their appearance on the show in an attempt to try and clear Canada's reputation in the eyes of the Americans, and they go about this by telling some good old-fashioned classic Canadian jokes. But it turns out Terrence and Phillip's being on The Conan Show was nothing more than an underhanded ruse, perpetrated by Sheila Broflovsky, Mothers Against Canada, and the US government, to capture the duo. At the United Nations building, the Canadian ambassador urges America to return Terrence and Phillip back to them, but the American ambassador decided to be diplomatic and escalated the situation to be much worse. So Canada decided to return the favor by bombing the Baldwin family. This prompts President Bill Clinton to declare war on Canada, and with his newly appointed Secretary of Offense, Sheila Broflovsky, he and America intend to kick ass. Meanwhile in hell, Kenny meets God's fallen angel, Satan himself. Satan is just about to begin inflicting eternal torment onto Kenny when he's interrupted by his new lover, Saddam Hussein. Try not to think about how weird it is that the real-life Saddam Hussein wasn't even dead by the time they made this movie. Actually, it's kinda weird. In this movie, and then later in Season 4, they explain that he was killed by a pack of wild boars, but in his first appearance in South Park in the Season 2 premiere episode, Not Without My Anus, he's killed by the noxious fumes of every Canadian citizen farting all at the same time. And as funny looking as these Canadians in the show are, they don't look like no wild boars I've ever seen. Anyway, this scene is just meant to establish Satan's frustration with his relationship with Saddam. Then at South Park Elementary during recess, the kid Gregory begins protesting the way America's handling the whole thing, condemning their actions. It's at this time that Stan notices that Wendy takes a liking to him because of how political he is. Cartman makes the point that the incoming war is pretty much all Sheila's fault. He then begins singing the old South Park classic, Kyle's Mom's a Bitch. This is of course a reprised and expanded upon version of the song from Season 1, Episode 10, Mr. Hanky the Christmas Pooh. And just as the song is coming to its close with Cartman's big showstopper, Sheila comes up from behind, and here's part of what Cartman's been saying about her. This prompts Sheila to start a second town hall meeting where she invites Dr. Voznacher to show off his newest invention, the V-chip. It's essentially a dog shock collar, only instead of being provoked by barking, it's provoked by swear words. They effectively make Cartman their guinea pig by installing the V-chip into him. And you know, because he's fucking Cartman, he starts cursing once and gets the shock, and then that makes him curse more, and he essentially gets stuck in a cursing and getting electrocuted feedback loop. Voznacher states that in the next coming weeks, all the children of South Park will be equipped with these V-chips. Meanwhile, tensions between America and Canada... Tensions between America and Canada grow thicker as the American government begins rounding up all Canadian American citizens and putting them into death camps. Did I say death camps? I meant happy camps. The US intends to make a public spectacle out of Terrence and Phillip's execution by having a USO show followed by the execution, and then that would kick off the Canadian-American War. Meanwhile, Stan, Kyle, and Cartman have founded a resistance group against Mothers Against Canada. While doing so, though, Stan remembers Chef's advice from earlier and asks Kyle to put in a search for the word clitoris, which leads to them finding a German Scheisse fetish video with a man shitting on Leanne Cartman. Originally, I didn't even want to mention this scene, not because it's bad or I dislike it or anything, but just because it's actually so funny I didn't want to spoil it. Then I got to thinking and realized that anyone watching this video either already has seen the movie or probably doesn't intend to see it. And plus, this scene serves as a perfect segue into the troubles that Matt and Trey had with Paramount and the MPAA. Instead of the final version of the scene where it's like a 20-second long scene about Cartman's mom getting shit on by the German dude, it was originally supposed to be about a 5-second long scene where they find a video of Cartman's mom fucking a horse, but because of notes from the MPAA, Paramount forced Matt and Trey to change the scene. As Matt and Trey were gunning for this movie to have an R rating, but the MPAA in its original state wanted to give the movie an NC-17, which, if you don't know what that means, it pretty much means that only people above the age of 17 and older are allowed to see the movie in theaters. Not even with parental accompaniment can anyone under the age of 17 see an NC-17 movie. And that's not even to mention the fact that most theaters won't even screen NC-17 movies, period. So pretty much the NC-17 rating is the kiss of death on any movie. And so yeah, pretty much Matt and Trey made the scene way longer and way more grotesque than it needed to be as sort of a middle finger to the MPAA and Paramount. But the scene that was decidedly worse than their original scene, for some reason, was deemed more appropriate than the original joke, so they left it in. Another change they made to the movie as sort of a middle finger to the MPAA is regarding the title of the movie. See, the original title of the movie was South Park All Hell Breaks Loose, but the MPAA objected to that, and Paramount Pictures claimed that hell is not allowed in the title of a movie, which is a blatant lie because, you know, Bad Girls Go to Hell, A Flower Named Hell, and all the Hellraiser movies. And so in frustration, Matt and Trey just sort of jokingly suggested that they change the title of the movie to South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, thinking that Paramount would get the double entendre and that, you know, it's a penis joke, but they went ahead and went with that title anyway. And not to mention the fact that Paramount really wanted Matt and Trey to make this movie PG-13 material, but I've rambled on and on long enough about the behind-the-scene politics of this movie. The boys put out a message for any kid that wants to help Terrence and Phillip to meet them at Carl's warehouse. Meanwhile in hell, Saddam Hussein and Satan anxiously await their time to roam the earth again, as Terrence and Phillip's death will release their evil onto the world and let them walk amongst the living again. But because Saddam keeps being an ass to Satan, he goes off and mopes to himself and decides to do his best impression of a Disney princess, singing about how he wants to just live up there. Where babies burp and flowers bloom. Up on Earth, the boys have their first Viva la Resistance meeting and have a pretty decent turnout with Wendy, Gregory, and a bunch of other students from their 3rd grade class showing up. Unfortunately, Stan didn't thoroughly plan ahead, but luckily Gregory's there to save the day, coming up with a plan to tunnel their way into the USO show and sneak Terrence and Phillip out and then get them back to Canada. He initially plans to do this by himself, but then Stan volunteers he and the rest of the boys up so that he can impress Wendy. Gregory suggests that they enlist the help of the mole to take out this mission, and then he breaks out into the best song in the movie in my humble opinion. Like I said before, I'm not going into depth with any of these songs. Yes, before anyone mentions it in the comments, I know I skipped over What Would Brian Boitano Do. Again, I'm making a separate video for the songs in this movie. Just thought it was worth noting that this song starts off as a completely original and then begins incorporating a bunch of the previous songs from the movie. Cut back to hell where Satan and Saddam are in bed together and Satan's just trying to have a pleasant conversation with Saddam, but Saddam keeps fucking with him. So Satan goes off and tries to have a moment to himself where he can just cry it out, and Kenny comes up and consoles him and encourages him to just leave Saddam. The boys make their way over to the mole's house only to discover that not only is he a fellow kid, but he's also been grounded for saying naughty things about God. Nevertheless, they work everything out and the mole agrees to help tunnel them into the USO show and get Terrence and Phillip out. Back in hell, Satan finally confronts Saddam for mistreating him and says that when the time comes and Terrence and Phillip are executed, he intends to go up to Earth to rule on his own. This prompts Saddam to sing a song to try and win Satan back by singing about how he can change, blaming all his shortcomings on society and his abusive parents. The song itself doesn't really do anything for Satan, but then Saddam begins to do a sexy Saddam dance and Satan falls for him all over again. So the two reconcile and begin packing and planning for their impending return to Earth, much to Kenny's disappointment. Back on Earth, Terrence and Phillip's execution is imminent as they strap the two into the electric chairs and prepare for the USO show. Time is of the essence, so the mole tasks Cartman to go shut off the alarm system as he gets onto the stage. He tasks Stan and Kyle with stalling the USO show for as long as possible so that he can get to Terrence and Phillip, and he begins digging his way onto the stage. Stan and Kyle make their way into the audience to find that Big Gay Al is already wrapping up the USO show, so they scream that they want more. Everybody in the audience concurs and screams for more Big Gay Al, which prompts Big Gay Al to sing the most fabulous song in the movie. Cartman is just about to deactivate the alarms when Kenny's ghost interrupts and scares the shit out of Cartman. He flees without deactivating the security, which unfortunately means when the mole gets to Terrence and Phillip, he's caught, and guard dogs are sent after him. By the time the mole escapes to the other end of his tunnel, it's already too late, and he's in terrible condition. He dies in Kyle's arms. Just as an anonymous person is about to throw the switch to kill Terrence and Phillip, Stan and the rest of the boys interrupt, passing on to them Kenny's ghost's warnings about Saddam Hussein and Satan coming to the surface should Terrence and Phillip's blood be spilled on American soil. Upon hearing this, Mothers Against Canada and the army break out into laughter and throw the switch to kill Terrence and Phillip anyway. Just as that happens, Canada's army begins their attacks on the US. And as the chaos starts to go down, Cartman takes the opportunity to try and shut off the electric chair. As he does so, though, he gets shocked, and that causes him to cuss, which causes the V-chip to shock him as well. And I'm guessing the electricity from the V-chip and the electricity from the electric chair just sort of has a weird effect on him. Terrence and Phillip flee, and just as Stan goes after them, a bomb hits nearby him, knocking him a few yards away and dizzying him. After a few moments, he comes to and finds the Clitoris. The Clitoris tries to give him advice on saving Terrence and Phillip and ending the war, but he's having none of it, and exclaims that she needs to tell him how to make Wendy like him. Clitoris explains that he needs to have confidence. If he believes in himself, others will believe in him. As the Clitoris fades away, Wendy, Gregory, and the rest of La Resistance approaches Stan. Gregory gloats about making a mistake and sending a boy to do a man's job, and Wendy shoots him a dirty look as she's beginning to see him for the pompous asshole he truly is. Stan ignores him, however, and leads La Resistance to try and find Terrence and Phillip. Stan and the others regroup with Kyle and Cartman, and he explains to them the good news that he finally found the Clitoris and he might be able to get Wendy to like him again. Cartman, miffed at Stan for forgetting the task at hand, calls him a dipshit, which causes the V-chip to act up and shock Kyle. The kids all go off to find Terrence and Phillip, who at that point are being ambushed by the military who've caught up with them. Just as it looks like all hope is lost for them, La Resistance shows up and gets between them and the military, and Kyle does what Kyle does best, giving a speech about how instead of parents blaming the media for the actions of their kids, they should instead take responsibility and deal with their kids' actions head on. He elaborates that he's tired of her going off and blaming everyone else whenever he fucks up, and he just wants his mom back. His speech is touching enough to make the soldiers drop their weapons, but not touching enough to reach his mother. She swipes the general's gun and shoots Terrence and Phillip down in cold blood. As their Canadian blood spills onto American soil, the earth begins to shake. Satan and Saddam Hussein emerge from the earth and explain that Sheila's brought enough intolerance into the world for them to make their return. Then Saddam's ego takes over and he completely sidelines Satan so that he can make the changes he sees fit to the earth. But he makes the grave mistake of calling Cartman fat, so Cartman curses at him and realizes that the malfunctioning V-chip has shocked all of the demons surrounding him. So now Cartman has to do what he does best and hurls a bunch of obscenities and insults towards Saddam, taking advantage of the V-chip's malfunctions to try and electrocute Saddam to death. Saddam then makes his second grave mistake by insulting Satan as he yells at him to save him. That was the last straw, as Satan declares that he's tired of Saddam and throws him off a cliff to his death. Satan then thanks Kenny for encouraging him to leave Saddam and grants him one wish. Kenny decides to use that wish to revert everything back to the way it was before the war, even though that would mean that he has to die again. Satan laments that he guesses he's destined to live in hell forever alone, but luckily then he meets and befriends Mr. Hat. Before Kenny's wish takes effect, the boys thank him and he turns around to say goodbye to them.
Goodbye, you guys.
As Satan and his minions fall back to hell, everyone who died in the war, including Mr. Garrison and Terrence and Phillip, come back to life. As the world restores to normality, Wendy gives Stan a kiss and says, "Fuck Gregory," fuck him right in the ear. Stan thanks the Clitoris for this outcome. The movie begins to draw to a close as everything's worked out. What a happy end. Americans and Canadians are friends again, and they all join hands to knock oppression down. And in a final hurrah, everyone begins to sing a reprised version of Mountain Town, and just before the credits close, we get the reveal that because of his sacrifice, Kenny actually made it into heaven. And that was South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. Aside from the obvious fact that, it's a comedy movie and it does the comedy very well, this movie also has a hell of a lot of heart, and its themes of the dangers of not being able to take personal responsibility I think are wonderful. Yes, it's mostly intended to be funny, but I also feel as though there's a lot of decent learning value in this movie. I've heard the criticism that post-movie South Park episodes tend to get really preachy and heavy-handed with its messages, but it really never feels that way here. If you want to overanalyze the themes and messages in this movie and find deeper meaning, it's great for that. And if you want to just turn your brain off and laugh for an hour and a half, this movie's also great for that. There is a very clear divide in South Park fans, some who prefer the early seasons, some who prefer the middle seasons, and some who prefer the new stuff, but I feel like this movie is perfect for all fans of South Park. I'd even go as far as to recommend this movie to some people who don't like the show. I submit that as of this time, South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut is the definitive piece of South Park media ever. It beats the show, it beats the games, it beats all. Thank you all once again for 2,000 subscribers, and also just for watching this video. You all fucking rock. Hasta la pasta.